Smoke on the wind. Sun, cruel and relentless, baked the earth dry. The air, thick and heavy, smelled of dust and fear. A strange stillness had settled upon the canyon, a silence that screamed. Sarah felt it, a prickling unease that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She looked up at the towering pines, their needles already turning brown at the tips. They whispered amongst themselves, a dry, rustling language she couldn't understand. Her son, Daniel, played in the yard, oblivious to the tension that had gripped their small community. He was too young, too innocent to grasp the danger lurking in the dry brush that carpeted the hills. 7 years old, all boundless energy and infectious laughter, he was Sarah's whole world. The thought of anything happening to him sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to shake off the feeling of dread, telling herself it was just the heat playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, a primal instinct whispered a warning. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke. The fire came with a terrifying speed, a raging beast driven by the relentless Santa Ana winds. The sky turned a sickly yellow, then a horrifying orange as the flames devoured everything in their path. Panic choked the air, thick and acrid with smoke. Neighbors screamed, their voices lost in the roar of the inferno. Daniel clung to Sarah, his small body trembling. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging her to move, to escape the inferno that threatened to engulf them. She scooped him into her arms, her grip tight, her fear a living thing. "We have to go, Danny. Now!" The drive out of the canyon was a blur of flashing red lights and panicked faces. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. The air inside the car was thick with smoke, stinging their eyes and making it difficult to breathe. Daniel coughed, his small face streaked with tears and soot. As they finally cleared the canyon, Sarah risked a glance back. The fire raged behind them, a monstrous wall of flame consuming everything in its wake. Her home, their sanctuary, was gone. The evacuation center was a cacophony of noise and despair. Sarah held Daniel close, trying to shield him from the collective grief that filled the air. They were safe, for now, but the fire had taken everything from them. Their home, their belongings, their sense of security, all reduced to ashes. In the days that followed, Sarah struggled to hold herself together. The trauma of the fire, the loss of their home, the uncertainty of the future weighed heavily on her. Sleep offered no escape, her nights plagued by nightmares of fire and screams. But it was Daniel who seemed most affected. He had become withdrawn, his usual exuberance replaced by a chilling silence. He refused to talk about the fire, his big brown eyes filled with a fear that sent chills down Sarah's spine. One night, as Sarah tucked Daniel into their makeshift bed, he whispered, "Mummy, I hear them." "Hear what, sweetheart?" "The whispers," he said, his voice barely a breath. "In the fire." Life after the fire was a constant struggle. Sarah and Daniel were moved from one temporary housing to another, each place a stark reminder of what they had lost. The insurance money barely covered their basic needs, and the emotional toll was taking its toll on them both. Sarah found a part-time job at a local diner, trying to rebuild their lives piece by piece. But the guilt gnawed at her. Guilt that she hadn't been able to save their home. Guilt that Daniel was suffering. Guilt that she couldn't give him back the life he had before the fire. Daniel's whispers grew more frequent, more insistent. He claimed to see things in the shadows, fleeting figures that vanished when Sarah turned on the light. He complained of nightmares, his small body racked with sobs as he described being chased by walls of flame. Sarah tried to rationalize it, telling herself it was just a child's way of processing the trauma. But deep down, a seed of unease began to grow. What if there was more to Daniel's whispers than she wanted to believe? It was during a particularly vivid nightmare that Daniel screamed, "The burned child! He wants to play!" Sarah sat bolt upright in bed, her heart pounding in her chest. Daniel thrashed beside her, his small face contorted in terror. She gathered him in her arms, whispering soothing words until his sobs subsided and his breathing evened out. But Sarah couldn't shake off the image of the burned child that had haunted Daniel's dream. The image was so vivid, so real, it felt like a brand seared into her own mind. A child, his skin blackened and blistered, his eyes wide and empty, reaching out with charred hands. The next day, Sarah decided to visit the local library. She needed answers, some explanation for what Daniel was experiencing. She scoured the internet, her fingers flying across the keyboard, searching for any mention of supernatural occurrences after wildfires. That's when she stumbled upon a chilling legend. The legend spoke of a fire demon, a malevolent entity that fed on the chaos and destruction of wildfires. It was said to appear as a burned child, its eyes glowing embers in the darkness. The demon preyed on the vulnerable, those already weakened by loss and grief. Sarah tried to dismiss it as folklore, a spooky story meant to frighten children, but the more she read, the more the legend resonated with her. The whispers, the shadows, Daniel's nightmares, it all fit. Fear, cold and clammy, gripped her heart. What if the legend was true? What if Daniel was being tormented by something sinister, something born of the fire itself? She knew she had to do something to protect her son, but how do you fight something you can't see? Something that might not even exist? Driven by a mother's love and a growing sense of desperation, Sarah sought help from the unlikeliest of sources. A local shaman named Grace, known for her connection to the spirit world. Grace listened patiently as Sarah poured out her heart, her voice trembling with fear and exhaustion. "The fire," Grace said, her voice raspy but kind. "It leaves scars, not just on the land, but on the soul. Sometimes those scars attract things that feed on pain and fear." Grace gave Sarah a small pouch filled with herbs and whispered instructions on how to use them. "This will protect you and your son," she said, "but true peace can only come from facing your fears, from helping those lost souls find their way home." Sarah clung to Grace's words like a lifeline. She would do whatever it took to protect Daniel, even if it meant confronting the unknown, the terrifying reality that lay beyond the veil of the ordinary. Armed with Grace's amulet and a newfound determination, Sarah decided to face her fears head-on. She took Daniel back to the ruins of their home, to the heart of the fire's devastation. The air hung heavy with the smell of ash and charred wood, a stark reminder of the inferno that had swept through their lives. Daniel clung to Sarah, his small hand trembling in hers. He was afraid, she could feel it, but he was also determined to be brave. For her. As they stood there amidst the ashes and the ghosts of their past, Sarah felt a shift in the air. The temperature dropped, and a cold wind whipped around them, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and something else, something ancient and unsettling. And then she saw him. The burned child stood at the edge of the ruins, his silhouette stark against the twilight sky. His skin was ashen grey, his eyes two burning embers that seemed to bore into Sarah's very soul. He didn't speak, but his presence radiated a palpable aura of sadness and longing. Fear threatened to overwhelm Sarah, but she pushed it down, replacing it with a surge of empathy. This was not a demon, she realized, but a lost soul, a victim of the fire, trapped between worlds. She knelt before him, her gaze steady, and spoke the words that Grace had taught her, words of peace, of understanding, of release. As she spoke, she felt Daniel squeeze her hand, his fear giving way to a kind of awe. The burned child turned his gaze to Daniel, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He reached out a hand, not to grab, but to touch. Daniel, his face a mask of wonder, tentatively reached back. Their fingers brushed, and a look of peace washed over the burned child's face. Then, like a wisp of smoke on the wind, he was gone. The fire had left its mark, indelible scars on the land and on their souls. But in the ashes of destruction, Sarah and Daniel found a different kind of healing, a deeper understanding of loss, resilience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. The whispers remained, faint echoes of the fire's fury, but they no longer held terror, only a solemn reminder of the past and the strength they had found in each other's love.